In a world full of distractions, there is one big question on every dog owner's lips.
How do I become more than just the person holding the other end of the leash?
We all get dogs with a dream in mind, a vision of the future. And if right now your everyday reality isn't quite that picture you had in mind, you are in the right place.
It really doesn't have to be this way.
You absolutely can and will be more to your dog than just the person who gets in between them and the world.
The key is you need to be more sexy.
More sexy than the neighbourhood cat.
More sexy than the jogger in the park.
More sexy than that half-eaten hamburger they just found on the floor.
And yes, even more sexy than the dog across the road.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Lauren.
Together we're Absolute Dogs.
And you're listening to the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast.
Welcome to this episode of the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast. In this episode, we are talking about coming out of the pandemic, coming out from behind the rocks.
Out we come. Now, when you come back out, no, carry on, keep going. When you come out from a period like we've just had, actually, for some dogs, for some people, for some owners, to be honest, the whole situation can be quite scary, right, Tom?
Absolutely.
And actually,
I'm sorry, I just don't know where coming from behind the rocks was.
It can be quite worrying, and I think most of all, I would say, what we've seen here as a training centre and what we've experienced are people that almost have now got a bit of a story going.
Yeah.
Like he is a pandemic puppy, or he's a puppy who's had to live through a period of no socialisation. And actually, what we want to do is we want to turn this on its head. We want to go from struggle to strength, and we actually want to make sure that we do our best by all of our dogs throughout all over the world, bringing them back into the world in a really sensible way.
Absolutely. And so what we're going to be doing in this episode is we are going to be going through really what would be our top considerations, our top tips, our top games for getting back out there. And also what we've got for you is an ebook that we have prepared for you, a valuable resource that you can have a read through to really support you in this time. And you can get hold of that ebook by heading to absolutedogs.me/pandemic.
And the cool thing about this ebook is that it's been created just for you. It's been created purely and solely around this topic to ensure that you guys feel really empowered, really looked after by us. And we want to make sure that you're rock stars in your confidence, whether you're coming out from behind rocks or whether you just want to rock it and get out there again. What I would say is that this is armed to set you off in the right path.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was absolutedogs.me/pandemic. Okay, so first tip that we've got for you, or first consideration, I guess, is it's not as bad as you think it is, okay? So maybe your dog hasn't had the experiences that they would have had outside of the pandemic, but if you've got maybe an older dog, well, good news is they wouldn't have forgotten anything. And if you have a young dog that you got in the pandemic, well, as we always say time and time again, the absence of a bad experience far outweighs 100 good ones. So the fact that, yes, we've maybe not had that many experiences, but that's also meant we've not had that many bad experiences, actually you're in a really strong position right now.
And I think that's something that, I mean, Tom, we've both recommended that to our clients many times, right? Like, actually, let's avoid having any bad experiences right now, and let's look after and safeguard our dog's optimism and our and keep them in a place where they don't understand that these bad things happen. Actually, that's a lot better than them having lots and lots of bad experiences.
Exactly. So next tip that we've got for you is that there are levels to being outside. There are levels to out and about, and really importantly, guys, is that we must set our expectation and set the clear kind of goal of actually starting to go outside with our dogs into new places or new environments. And so the levels go like this. Level 1 is simply being in the environment. Can your dog be in the environment? They're checking it out, they're looking at it. Can they be in an environment? Can they maybe be in a calm state in an environment? Step 2 is, can they then do stuff? So can they, for example, do the things that they do at home with you in this new environment? Maybe it's play games. Maybe it's do a sit.
It might be as simple as, can they look at you and can they engage and can they eat? Because I know that I was out with a young dog the other day, a residential dog, and working with them, and they absolutely, Tom, couldn't even eat.
Yeah.
So actually the environment was too hard for them to just take a simple piece of food.
Exactly. And then level 3 is actually, can they learn in a new environment? Can they learn new stuff in this environment? And I think sometimes as dog owners, especially when maybe we're very familiar to the place we're going, but our dog isn't, we take for granted actually just our dogs being in that environment they're burning calories, their brain is working hard. I often think of this with little Thistle, our miniature dachshund, and sometimes you feel her head, and her head is like boiling hot, and you think that little brain must be working super hard, and yet not all that much is happening, right? So the key is that we often underestimate actually the amount of processing that's happening just by being in a place.
Yeah, and I think the thing is that so many of us are in a hurry to do all of it at once. I think my next tip would be, don't actually rush. You know what? You haven't been in a rush for the last 12 months. I don't know why we want to rush now, because actually there's a lot to just take a moment, take a breath, and just slow it down. And that's unusual for Tom or I to say slow it down. Like, we are fast-paced people.
I was actually quite shocked that, because obviously we live in Devon, it's a popular place for people to come on holiday, and I was actually quite shocked that literally as soon as people could travel, of a sudden the roads were full.
We were gridlocked.
The petrol stations were running out of petrol, and it's like, wow, like you've been raring to go. But I think, and that's fine, but I think when it comes to our dogs, actually being a little bit more intentional and methodical about it.
Intentional, methodical, and operate with an I suppose, a level of caution and process. Is this going to be a good experience for them? Is this the experience they need right now? So, for example, I was at an event the other day. I took with me a young dog who I knew may find the event a lot, and yet she didn't get out of the vehicle at the event. What we did was we drove her off site, took her out somewhere else, and then drove back on site, right, so she could still hear all of what was going on there, but she didn't need to necessarily go out at that event with all those people there. And I think that's really important to consider. Is this right for my dog in this moment? And yes, I know we're like gung-ho. I remember being having, when I was younger, a dog who didn't like other dogs, for example. She didn't like black dogs in particular, and the advice would have been, let's go out and let's see all black dogs right now. In fact, let's meet every dog we can, 100 dogs in a day. We would be so far away from that these days with what we would be suggesting, and it's no different in this post-pandemic recovery period. You don't need to meet everyone today. Actually, your best response in your dog is a neutral response, is no response. And so actually what you're looking for isn't a dog who rushes up and sort of greets crazily. It isn't a dog who's hiding and running behind your legs. It isn't a dog who's barking, lunging. It isn't a dog who's crazily excited. What you're looking for, a dog who kind of comes out and goes, cool, and then can mooch on.
Exactly.
And actually, you don't get that from overfacing them, and you don't get that from throwing them in the deep end, and you don't get that from being absolutely crazy bonkers with them. You get that from a calm, consistent, conscientious way through.
Absolutely. So next tip, what we want to do is revisit that bucket analogy that we often talk about. Every dog has a bucket, and exciting things pay into that bucket, scary things pay into that bucket. The bucket fills and fills, and at some point it might overflow.
And you'll all know what it looks like when it overflows, right?
Yeah, that's when your dog probably isn't listening to you. Maybe they're barking and lunging. Maybe they're looking very worried, but the bucket takes time to empty. And what we've got to realize in taking our dogs to new places, taking our dogs on holiday, going places with them, is that right now, because of lack of exposure, probably every event is an event. It is not a non-event.
And lots of rest is really appropriate.
Yeah.
Rest is king. Like, my dogs sleep most of every day.
Yeah.
I do look at them sometimes and feel a little envious. And they kind of look and lie there and say, bring me snacks. And at the same time, I kind of think this is what they should be doing.
Yeah.
They shouldn't be running around the house doing zoomies. They shouldn't be going out in the park and creating chaos. Actually, our dogs should be resting. So take adequate breaks. Your dog doesn't need 5 exposures a day. In fact, your dog might not even need one.
No.
Actually, what you might look at your day and say, actually, is this appropriate today? Okay, today I may take them out somewhere. Okay, tomorrow they're going to have a rest day.
No.
And rest days are really appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. So next tip is it's kind of a confidence growing one. It's one that also grows their focus. And that is that what we'd love you to do right now, as in not right now, but today, is create a behavior with your dog that almost acts as a conversation starter in new environments. So that might be putting 2 feet up on an object. That might be teaching them to do middle, that behavior where they come around your legs and stand between your legs. That might be a nose touch to your hand. All of these games you learn about in the 25 Days Sexier Than a Squirrel Challenge. These are the games that are going to allow you to support and help your dog in new environments and start that conversation. Once we're cool with being in the environment, now let's start a conversation with our dogs, but we want it to be one that they find easy, an easy win.
This is a conversation that your dog's going to want to have. This is a conversation that your dog's kind of like, pick me, I want to play this game. You're not looking for a conversation where your dog says, oh dear Lord, I find this difficult at home, let alone when I'm out and about. So Sex in a Squirrel Challenge, Tom, if someone listening wants to get hold of it and hasn't grabbed their spot yet,
then all you've got to do is head to absolutedogs.me/sexy and you can get involved in the challenge. There's 70% off for everybody listening, and if you go to that link, then that will be automatically applied and you can get involved in the challenge.
So one of the things I'm thinking with the dogs that I've been seeing at classes and training centre here is that actually people put them in a lot of situations and don't necessarily top up the optimism in between. So what do I mean by that? Well, okay, the dog might have had an experience where they've, I don't know, taken them out and about, they've been on to the pub, they've maybe taken them for a different walk, they've maybe had some exposure they haven't had before, and when they do get back home, they kind of carry on as normal and then put them in the next situation, rather than considering, is there any optimism here that we can be sort of topping up? Is there a bank here that we can be sort of refilling, refueling, and really encouraging?
Exactly. And the way that you can think about that is that, when you take your dog out into the world, events happen, things happen, and the world is constantly asking your dogs questions. It can be like, hey, do you want to come over here and sniff me? Hey, do you want to come over here and chase me? Hey, am I something to worry about, or am I okay? And the world is, all these events are happening, and your dog's constantly getting bombarded with these questions. What we like to do is help our dogs out and answer those questions for them as much as possible, because they've got so much to process. So maybe when the squirrel appears, maybe when the other dog appears on the other side of the park, maybe when they hear that noise, you give them some of their daily food allowance. And when you deliver some of that daily food allowance, what you're saying is, hey, I spot that too. It's nothing to worry about. It's not important. Here is a positive outcome. And as you do that, your dog has less and less to process. Fewer and fewer events pay into their bucket, and therefore they can move from just simply being to actually doing in the environment. And then eventually they can move to that top level of actually learning, and you're going through this environment as a team together.
Now, there are so many games that boost optimism. There are so many games that top it up throughout our training academy, throughout Sexy and a Squirrel. Games like Cardboard Chaos, games like Knock 'em Over, Thunder, Tornado, Typhoon, like all such good confidence, optimism, sort of base level games, and so doable in your own house and in your own surroundings.
Absolutely. And so if you're looking for where to start, you're listening to this and you're like, okay, enough is enough. I need to do something. I need to start training for the situation rather than firefighting in it. All you've got to do is head to absolutedogs.me/sexy and get involved in the challenge. And I think the key with everything, with every episode of the podcast, is we give you lots of input and lots of advice and strategies. Actually, the thing that can sometimes stop them from working is if we hear them and we think, oh yeah, I'm going to do that in the future, but then we don't take action.
And I think that's probably the missing step in many people's lives in many ways. And be honest, guys, we can be the same. Action sometimes is that step that's just that little bit hard. Like you need to actively do it. So get out there, take action. If you haven't already, jump on board with us. We've got a lot to share with you. Now, for me, ditch the bowl and ditch the routine. They come hand in hand when I think about post-pandemic recovery. I think about how I'm going to use all my food, why I'm using my food in that way. And obviously that's part of Sexy and a Squirrel. So you guys on there will have all of this. If you haven't got that, obviously number one, get it. But number two, if you haven't got it, like really, we do not feed from a bowl for this reason. There's so much we get to reward on a day-to-day basis. Yes. There's so much we need to capture that opportunity.
Exactly, and support our dogs. You know, if we think about this as going through the world as a team with our dogs, sometimes we we want our dogs to help us out, maybe by recalling when we need them to recall, or maybe by, I don't know, coming and sitting next to us and being calm when we're in the house. But we've got to hold up our end of the bargain, which is actually supporting them in situations where maybe they don't feel that comfortable, maybe the environment's testing them a little bit. And so ditching the bowl, using your dog's daily food allowance allows you to do that. It's all about supporting your dog.
Within that, ditching the routine too. For me, post-pandemic recovery, it's all about the routines changing. And at the same time, hopefully there has been no routine because you've been following us a little while. And if you haven't been, ditch that routine from day one. Ditch that routine from right now. And that for me might include how I feed, where I walk, when I do take my dog, when I don't take my dog, when I choose to go to the beach without my dog, when I choose to go to a restaurant and think I don't need my dog sitting at my heels. Actually, they'd be comfier at home. Other days, maybe they do want a little stroll. Ditch the routine is infiltrated throughout Tom's and my life, and it makes us ultra flexible, I would say, on the whole. And I think that both of us could maybe not be flexible without having this understanding of how we roll, right?
Absolutely. So really, on the subject of kind of taking action and taking immediate action and doing something about it, a great next step for you guys is to download this workbook, this ebook that we've put together for you. It's free, it's yours.
And it's very much bespoke, niche, and made for exactly this. You can share it with your friends in the sense that get them to listen to the podcast, get them to hear what we're saying here, because we want to help dogs. Let me say that again. We want to help dogs, and we want to help you and their carers all over the world, because we know that they make the world a better place, and we know that you and them are a team together in this, and so we know that this is going to help you to help your dog in this post-pandemic recovery stage. So to get that ebook, you are going to head to,
all you've got to do is head to Absolute Dogs, all one word, absolutedogs.me, that's ME, so absolutedogs.me/pandemic, and you'll be able to download the ebook there.
And please, 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 please share this podcast. Make sure that other people listen to it. We want to help dogs all over the world. Share that link to people who maybe haven't got a chance to listen to the podcast, because we know this makes a huge difference. I suppose at the same time, people could review the podcast too, Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. Stick a review on the podcast by heading to Apple Podcasts, leaving a review, and make sure you type a review, even if it's just one or two words, because that really gives context for people that are looking for dog training advice. And what we believe is that there's always a game for that. There's always hope, and you don't have to resort to intimidation, use of aversives.
I'm going to shamelessly beg at this point, because I really know that your reviews make a difference, right?
Really
I'm shamelessly asking.
They save dogs' lives.
Us a review, because this makes a difference. It makes us want to get out there and find out more for you and be bringing podcasts week in, week out, because we know it's making a difference. So please get over there, leave us a review.
So with that, guys, grab your free ebook. It's over at absolutedogs.me/pandemic. Leave us a review, share this podcast. Let's get the word out there. That was this episode of the Sexier Than a Squirrel podcast. We will see you next week for another episode. And in the meantime, remember,
stay sexy.
Hey, before you go, have you taken part in the worldwide Sexier Than a Squirrel challenge?
It's a 25-day online video program, huge energy, amazing community, and over 6,000 people are already taking part.
The only question is, you know where you are today, where do you want to be 25 days from now? Head to absolutedogs.me/sexy.